everyone, it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, we're going to learn how to crochet this gorgeous World Traveler wrap. This is beautiful and cozy. We're going to be doing some star stitch to complete this. We're going to crochet it lengthwise, and then we're going to seam it together so it creates this really nice kind of striping that kind of wraps around you. This is super cozy. You can wear it with the neck up straight, or you can also flip it down and it looks like a collar, almost like a sweater. So we're going to start by crocheting it's a big rectangle. We're going to crochet the rectangle together, and then we're going to weave in some ends and sew it together, kind of seam it at the shoulder here. So as you can see, it has a cozy neck, and then it comes down to a point in the front, really pretty to kind of keep the front of you warm. And then the back here comes straight across, so it pulls over your head. So the finished piece before seaming is about 21 inches wide, and the length of it, now it's seamed together, but the length of it from one edge around to the other edge is about 42 inches long. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. We're going to be using a 10mm P crochet hook, and this is my Furl Streamline. I'll put the link down below if you'd like to get one for yourself. And we're going to be using this beautiful yarn. I love this palette. It's very kind of like deep brights and wintry. This is called Umami from Hobbii, and this is a very soft, it's like a wool acrylic blend. And if you need to substitute yarn, each one of these is 90 yards, and I have 8 of them. So this is 720 yards of super bulky 6 yarn. So when you're substituting, look for the super bulky 6 and look for a yarn that recommends the 10mm P crochet hook that we will be using. Again, I'm using 8 balls of Umami from Hobbii. I'll put the link down below for this yarn, but if you'd like to replicate my palette, this pretty color here I have is number 16, also called dark magenta. This orange here is number 18, also called Rust. The blue that I have here is color number 26, and that is called Petroleum Blue. And then the green here on the end is number 22, and that is called Leaf Green. It comes in lots of other different colors. Again, the link can be found down below. So let's get started. Okay, I have my hook, and my first color is going to be this beautiful raspberry color, so we're ready to go. Before we start though, if you're doing multicolors like I am, it is helpful to kind of shift your colors around and just kind of see what order that you want your colors to be in. So I'm going to do the raspberry, the green, the orange, and then the blue. Okay, but again, play around with them, and I like to just do that and plan a little bit before I start. So we can kind of scoot these out of the way now, and we're going to grab our yarn because we're going to do our first step, which is going to be our starting chain. So for our star stitch that we'll be doing, it's any odd number for your starting chain. So the multiple is just any odd number. So you can be pretty flexible. And we're going to do a starting chain of 105 chains because we're going to be making this lengthwise. So when I did my starting chain and I was experimenting, I went roughly from one side of the hip around the neck and then back down to the other side of the hip. Maybe a little bit past that just for some wiggle room, but that was kind of the rule of thumb that I used. Now you can just kind of start making an odd number of chains and just see what, throw it around your neck and just kind of see what looks best. So it's really up to you. It's pretty flexible. So what we want to do first is our starting chain. So grab your yarn, and what we're going to do, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. And we're going to have a small tail, wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop, bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up that loop and tighten. And like I said, we're going to do 105 chains, okay? So to make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, and 105. So here is our starting chain. And you can see it's nice and long. Again, if you want to kind of like throw it around your neck, feel free to do that and just see how it fits and feels, and it'll give you a little bit of a sense of the length of your finished piece. Okay, so let's move on to row 1. For row 1, what we're going to do is we're going to work a stitch called a single crochet 5 together, okay? And we're going to go through it step by step. So let me just grab a little bit more yarn here. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert the hook in the second chain from the hook. Now I'm going to zoom way in so you can see better. So the loop on our hook already does not count. So we're going to count 1, 2 chains, and we're going to work our hook into that second chain from the hook. So insert your hook into that chain and bring up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, and then insert your hook into the next loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Insert your hook into the next chain and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on your hook. Insert your hook into the next chain and bring up a loop. You'll have 5 loops on your hook. Insert your hook into the next chain and bring up a loop. You'll now have 6 loops on your hook. So once you have 6 loops on your hook, what you're going to do is wrap the yarn around your hook one more time, and you're going to bring it through all 6 of those loops on your hook. And you now have the beginnings of your first little star, just about. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work a chain 1 to close the star, okay? So wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through to close that star, okay? So this is our first star. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work our second star. We're going to use this first one as a kind of a jumping off point. So all of our stars at the top, you can see, have an what we're going to call an eye, a little loop at the top, okay? So we're going to begin our next star into the eye of our star we just made. So insert your hook into the eye and bring up a loop. Okay, then we're going to look at these last 2. So our star is made up. It has the eye that we talked about, but it also has spikes. See these vertical lines? These are what we're going to call spikes. We're going to go in between those last 2 spikes with our hook and bring up a loop from there. And then we're going to go into that last chain that we worked on our star, and that's really easy to see. You can see all the chains back here, but that last chain that we worked looks really big. It's real open because it was already worked into it, kind of stretched it open, okay? So we're going to go into that last chain worked and bring up a loop. You're going to have 4 loops on your hook now. And then what we're going to do is go into the next chain and bring up a loop. You can see it right next to all that. Bring up a loop. 5 loops are on our hook. And then work into the next chain, bring up a loop, and we'll have, once again, 6 loops on our hook. Pretty easy. Wrap the yarn around the hook one more time, bring it through all 6 of those loops. You can go nice and easy, making sure you go through all those loops, and then chain 1 to close the star and create that eye that we'll be working into next time, okay? So now you have 2 very beautiful stars that we've created, okay? Let's do a couple more of these together. All right, let's go into the eye of this last star worked and bring up a loop. Go in between those last 2 spikes and bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook. Go in that last chain worked. Remember, it's real big and open. Bring up a loop. 4 loops are on the hook. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook now. Go into the next chain and bring up a loop. 6 loops are on the hook. So now you can wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through all 6 loops. You might need to kind of use your other hand to guide it. It's a lot of loops. And then we're going to chain 1 to close that star. Okay, we now have 3 beautiful stars. Okay, let's do another one. Go into the eye. We're going to pick up the speed a little bit now because we've done a few. If you need to go back and watch the video or use the slow motion feature, feel free to do that as well. We'll do a couple more together, but we'll pick it up, the speed a little bit. Go into the eye. Bring up a loop. Go into those last 2 spikes you worked, bring up a loop. Go into that last chain worked, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. Once you have 6 loops, let me get some more yarn here. Once you have 6 loops on the hook, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through all 6 of those loops. And I like to use my other hand as a little helper. And then chain 1 to close up your star. And then I like to just straighten it out, but that's just a personal preference. All right, let's work another star. Go into the eye, bring up a loop. Go in between those last 2 spikes, bring up a loop. Go in that last chain worked, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and chain 1. All right, go into the eye, bring up a loop. Go into those last 2 spikes, bring up a loop. Go into that last chain worked, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain, bring up a loop. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and chain 1. Very, very easy and pretty once you kind of get the hang of it. It's a little odd at first, but once you make a few stars, it starts to make more sense. Okay, let's do one more together and then we'll depart and work our stars all the way across, okay? Go into the eye of the star, bring up a loop. Go into those last 2 spikes. And I wanted to show you too, I like to kind of use my hand and sort of separate it and use my, like as a helper. Go to those last 2 spikes worked, bring up a loop. Go into that last chain worked, bring up a loop. Go into the next chain and bring up a loop. Go into the next chain and bring up a loop. 6 loops are on our hook. Wrap yarn around hook. Bring it through all 6 loops, using your hand as a helper if needed, and chain 1, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to keep working our stars all the way across. We have some nice progress right now. If it's curling a little bit, that's normal. Things will very much straighten out as we move along. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep working our stars all the way across in our chain. Remember, we have a nice long chain because we're making this lengthwise. And then when we rejoin, we'll join when we get almost to the end of the row. I'll show you how to finish up the row, and then we'll move on to the next row. Okay, we're just coming up to the end of the row here. I just have a few chains left, so let's work that last star together. We're going to work till we have 6 loops on our hook. Go through all 6 loops and chain 1. And then we have one more to do. There's just a few chains left. So go in the eye, in between those last 2 spikes, in that last chain worked, in the next chain, and the next chain. And then all 6 loops rather, and chain 1. Okay, now our last star is done, and you should have just 1 chain at the end of the row. Okay, so to finish off row 1, what we're going to do is work a half double crochet into that last chain. So to make a half double crochet, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert your hook into that last chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook, wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through all 3 loops. Just like that, okay? You can kind of straighten things out a little bit. So here is our first row. It looks very pretty. The length is what we need it to be. And we're ready to move on to row 2. So row 2 is super easy, and I'm just going to zoom out a tiny bit because our piece is growing here. So what we're going to do for row 2 is to chain 2, 1, 2, and then we're going to turn our work. And then all we're going to do for row 2 is work 2 half double crochets in each eye of our stars from the previous row. So sometimes if you're new to star stitch, I like to flip over and make sure I'm in the eye because it looks a little bit different on the back, but you can sort of tell by looking. But if you need to check, just kind of flip it over and peek, okay? So again, we're going to work 2 half double crochets in each eye of the star all the way across, okay? So let's do a few together. Wrap yarn around hook, insert it into the eye, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops. That's 1 half double crochet, and then we're going to work a second in that eye as well, just like that. Hop over to the next eye if you need to peek at the front to just double check where you're in the that you're in the right spot, and work 2 half double crochets into that eye, 1 and 2. I'm going to get a little bit more yarn here. Hop to the next eye. You can peek if you need to. Work 2 half double crochets in that eye, 1 and 2. Next eye, 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochet, okay? So just keep doing this all the way across, peeking if needed to make sure you're in the right spot. And you're just going to work 2 half double crochets in each of your eyes of your stars all the way across. Okay, so keep going across, and we will rejoin when we get towards the end of row 2. I'll show you how to finish off row 2, and then we'll move on to row 3. Okay, I'm just coming up to the end of the row and working my last 2 half double crochets into that last eye of the star from the previous row. And then we're going to finish off our row by working a half double crochet in the last stitch of the row. So what you can do is it kind of curves around, so just find like kind of the outermost stitch is what I like to do. So wrap yarn around hook, go into that last stitch of the row, and work your half double crochet just like that. Okay, now our row 2 is complete. Now we're going to switch colors. This is where kind of the magic of this project is going to be. When we switch colors and work 2 rows with each color, it's really going to make this stitch stand out. Okay, so you don't have to switch colors, it's completely up to you, but I'm going to show you how to do it if you would like to. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut the yarn and just fasten right off. If there's a way you like to join a new ball of yarn, feel free to do that. But I'm going to cut, leaving a tail, not too long, so it won't get all in the way, but you don't want to make it too short either because you want to be able to weave it in later. Now take your little tail you just cut, wrap the yarn around the hook, and bring it through the loop. Okay? And then just tighten it down. Now grab your next color. For us, it's going to be this pretty green color. Okay, so for row 3, we're going to go into that last stitch worked. I have my green yarn, and as a side note, when you're using multiple colors like this, if you can, try to pull it from the center if you're able to. It just makes things a lot neater. You can just kind of pull your colors as you use them. All right, so go into that last stitch work with your hook, and then take your new yarn, hook your new yarn onto the hook, bring it through, and we're just going to tie it right on. Again, if there's a way of joining a new yarn that you prefer, definitely feel free to do that. There's definitely lots of ways to do it. I'm just going to do it this way. All right, we're tying that new yarn right on. Once you get your new color tied on, we're going to turn our work, and you can see on this side the beautiful stars are in their entirety. They look lovely. We've completed the top of them. So then what we're going to do is go back into that same stitch that you worked, bring up a loop, and we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Next, we're going to insert the hook into the second chain from the hook. So the loop on here does not count. So go 1 and 2, insert the hook, bring up a loop. Insert the hook into the next chain at the bottom there, bring up a loop. So you'll now have 3 loops on the hook. Insert the hook into that first stitch right here and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on the hook. Insert the hook into the next stitch and bring up a loop. You'll have 5 loops on the hook. Insert your hook into the next stitch and bring up, into the next stitch and bring up a loop. You'll now have 6 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 of those loops, and then chain 1 to close, okay? So when you look at your stars, they'll now be stacked on top of one another, and the eyes should line up, okay? So then what we're going to do is the rest will seem pretty familiar to the way we did it last time, but we're going to be working into stitches this time instead of chains. But the way we started the row was just slightly different, okay? So what we're going to do now for the next star is go into the eye like we did before and bring up a loop. Go in between those last 2 spikes worked and bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Go into that last stitch work this time, and you can see how much more open it looks than the other ones. It's very easy to spot. So go into that last stitch worked and bring up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on the hook. Go into the next stitch, bring up a loop, 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop, and you'll have 6 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops once again, and chain 1. So now you can see the colors are really starting to play out in a fun way. Okay, let's do that again. Go into the eye of your star and bring up a loop. 2 loops are on the hook. Go in between those last 2 spikes worked and bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook.
Go in that last stitch work, remember it's a little bit more open looking than the other ones, and bring up a loop. 4 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop. 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop. 6 loops are on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and chain 1. We now have 3 stars. All right, let's do one more together, and then we're just going to do this all the way across, okay? So go into the eye once again, bring up a loop, 2 loops on the hook. Go in between those last 2 spikes of your star, bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook. Go into that last stitch worked, bring up a loop, 4 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop, 5 loops are on the hook. Go into the next stitch and bring up a loop, 6 loops are on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 6 loops, and chain 1. Okay, so what we're going to do is just repeat this all the way across until we get towards the end. When we're almost to the end, we'll rejoin and I'll show you how to wrap up row 3, and then you'll know what to do for the rest of your piece, okay? So just continue across and then we'll rejoin in just a minute. All right, we're just coming up to the end of the row here, and I'm going to work the last star of our row, working into those last couple of stitches here, and then we'll be at the end. You can see that last star, and then to finish the row at the end here there's going to be a stitch right at the edge. You can see right where it turns, and right in there you're going to work a half double crochet to finish the row, just like that, okay? So row 3 is complete, and you can start to see the beginnings of our next star. It's half the star, so when we work the next row, it'll complete the star like we see down here. So what you're going to do to finish your project is repeat rows 2 and 3, 2 and 3, over and over and over again until your piece is as wide as you would like it to be. Now, when you're changing colors, if you wanted to change colors like I'm doing, you want to change colors before you begin row 3. So right in here so you'll have one complete star, okay? So you can see how we have a, a round star, and here we have a half star. So anytime you begin row 3, you'll want to start with a new color, okay? So keep going by repeating rows 2 and 3 over and over and over again, starting the new color when you begin row 3, if you want to do stripes like me. And we will rejoin when we get towards the end, and I'll show you how to finish everything up. So just keep repeating. If you need to back up the video or, go use the slow motion feature, etc., you can do that as well. So keep going with rows 2 and 3, and we'll rejoin in just a minute. Okay, just coming up to the end of the row, working that last stitch, and then we'll do that last half double crochet in our turning chain to finish up. Okay, so, well, here is the back. It looks beautiful, and the front is looking great. So we're going to cut our yarn now and fasten off. Just wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through. Okay, so the last thing we need to do, actually 2 things we need to do, is we need to take care of these ends. Now all my tails are at one end of my project because of the way we switched colors. So we're going to go ahead and weave all of these ends in, and then we're going to do some seaming. Okay, so what we'll want to do now is to take our piece and flip it over so we're looking at the inside, because when we seam it, this will be the outside. So we want our tails to kind of stay on the inside of our piece. And then what we need to do is grab our tapestry needle and our scissors, and we're going to start weaving in our ends. Now we want to make sure we stay in the same color. So here I have an orange tail that I'm going to weave in. We're going to thread our tapestry needle, and you'll want to stay on in these back loops so they won't go to the front, and you want to stay in the orange area. You want to make sure when you weave your ends in that everything blends in really nicely. So go in one direction, and then come back in the other direction,
And then you can just give your tail a snip. Okay, so go ahead and weave in all of your ends. And when we rejoin, we're going to do some seaming next. Okay, so now our ends are all woven in, and now it's time to seam our piece. Now, what we want to do is bring the sides together first, making sure the outside or the public side, the right side, whatever you want to call it, is facing out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to position things. So you'll want to bring this right side down so that this edge, and I can turn this a little bit, so that this edge is lined up with this edge, okay? So then what we're going to do is we're going to turn our work, and if you want to, as an option, you can grab some stitch markers and just kind of clip this together, okay? Just to hold it in place, because we are going to flip it inside out so that we can seam it. So we want to seam it inside out, but we want to position it first to make sure it looks the best on the outside. So I'm just going to kind of just very quickly throw some stitch markers in here just to hold it together. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this, but it will help keep it together and just give you a little bit of security that it's going to stay in place as you sew, okay? So we're just going to throw a few of these in here. Now, if you don't have stitch markers, you could use a scrap piece of yarn or something like that. It's totally fine. And I'll just grab this first and last one is kind of important because you want these ends to be just right. Okay, just like that, okay? So now it's kind of held together and we're gonna sew it. So I grabbed some scrap yarn that matches and I'm gonna flip this inside out. So I grabbed just a length of yarn that I had left. I chose orange just because of this edge is orange and that's what we're going to be seaming. So what we want to do now is go in through here and we're going to turn this inside out so that our seam is going to be showing, okay? And we're just going to kind of turn it like this so we can see it really well, okay? It's not going to make sense when it's inside out. It just looks kind of lumpy right now, but when we turn it right side out, it'll make sense. Okay, so you can see where we've clipped it together. Okay, so now we're going to cut a piece of yarn, and this is quite a long seam that we're going to do along here. So I'm going to do about 2 to 3 feet. I want it to be a little bit long so that we can try and do it in one pass and not have to use multiple pieces of yarn to seam it. So thread your tapestry needle. And then what you're going to do is just start at one end. Now here's where we have it clipped down here. And as you go through, you can remove these stitch markers, but they are very helpful to kind of guide you as you go. Okay. And so what we're going to do is just take those two edges where we start, and we're just going to sandwich those together. And we're going to pull our yarn. Now this is quite long because we have to go across. But we're going to pull it almost all the way through till we have a little tail and then tie it nice and secure, just a couple of strong knots. And then we're going to start working across using the whip stitch, okay? So using your stitch markers as a guide, sandwich your pieces together, and we're going to just start whip stitching across. Now make sure you get at least 2 loops. So I'm going in this, I have 2 loops there, and I have 2 loops here. You don't want to use 1 loop because it could pull it and kind of distort your stitches, kind of pull a loop out a little bit far. Okay, so you're just going to work all the way across until you get to the end, and every time you come to a stitch marker, just pop it off and keep going. It's just going to help it stay together as we work. Okay, so I'm going to keep going with my seam and then we will rejoin in just a minute and finish everything up. Okay, we're just coming up to the end of our seam here. Now I like to kind of go a little over because as you can see, this rounds in and this rounds in, so it kind of creates a dip if you don't kind of go over where the edge where you need to go. So I'm going to just throw a few more seams in here, or stitches rather, just kind of over, you know, going over a little bit. And then what we can do is when you do that last seam, pull it almost all the way through, leaving a little loop here. And then send your needle through that loop, and then you can create a knot that way. And then you want to do that a couple of times, just because whenever you wear something, you want your seams to be nice and strong in case there's any tension put on them. And then while you have your needle threaded, take your needle and just travel through this orange section or whatever color you're using. And you can just weave the end in right then and there. Okay, so we're going to go in one direction, and then let's come back in the other direction, just kind of lock that tail into place. And then you can snip it with your scissors. And then we have one down here at the other end we'll take care of real quick. And same thing, we want to stay in that orange area with our tail, okay? Come in one direction, go back in the other direction, and snip, okay? So the last thing we need to do is turn our piece right side out. And we're going to kind of straighten it out too, because it'll be a little like kind of off center. So grab your piece and just flip it right side out. And it's going to sort of look like a cone right now, but we'll use this point that we created in the front as our marker. That should be centered on the body when you wear it. And so you can kind of use that as a guide. So if we slide this up and get everything kind of straightened out, you can see our seam. You might want to straighten it out a little bit, but our seam looks really nice at the top here. And when you wear it, you could wear it up snug like this to keep your neck warm, but it also looks really pretty if you kind of flip it down too, like a little collar, okay? So our beautiful wrap is complete. It's cozy, it's warm, and it's ready to wear. So that is how you crochet the World Traveler Wrap. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.